Welcome back to the Supernatural Japan podcast, the podcast that is all about the darker side of Japanese folklore, Japanese history, Japanese legend, all about ghosts, yokai, scary stories, all kinds of different things. The supernatural, the paranormal. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am a Canadian who is a fan of all things paranormal and supernatural, especially when they're about Japan. It's been a long time, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. The last time I was here chatting with you, I told you all about the Kappa, the legendary Japanese yokai, one of the best known yokai, the Kappa. And now we're back with a Japanese urban legend. And this is one that has been requested by many listeners. So here we are. The Inunaki Village urban legend is a famous Japanese ghost story and one of the country's creepiest and most enduring urban myths. It revolves around the supposedly cursed, isolated village that is said to be hidden deep within the mountains of Japan in the Fukuoka area. The legend is filled with eerie details, and its mystery has intrigued many over the years. The Tale of Inunaki Village. On a misty autumn morning, a young couple drove through the winding roads of the Japanese countryside. They were headed home after a long day of exploring the remote mountains of Fukuoka Prefecture. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves, and their car's headlights cut through the growing darkness. As they approached a fork in the road, they noticed a weathered wooden sign partially hidden by overgrown vines. The sign, barely legible, bore a chilling message. Beyond this point, the Japanese Constitution does not apply. The couple exchanged uneasy glances. It's probably a joke, the boyfriend said with a nervous chuckle. But curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to follow the narrow, unmarked path beyond the sign. The road quickly turned treacherous. Thick trees leaned over the path like sentinels, and the sound of the forest grew eerily quiet. Their car's GPS lost signal, and their phones showed no service. The deeper they drove, the more oppressive the air became, as if the forest itself were watching them. Suddenly, the car sputtered and stalled, and the boyfriend cursed under his breath as he tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't budge. "Great," he muttered, stepping out to check under the hood. While he worked, the girlfriend glanced around, feeling an inexplicable chill creep up her spine. In the distance, through the trees, she spotted dim lights flickering. It looked like a village. Maybe they can help us," she called to her boyfriend, pointing towards the lights. Reluctantly, he agreed, and they set off on foot. The village appeared like a ghost from the past. The houses were old and crumbling, their thatched roofs sagging under years of neglect. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, but the streets were deserted. A faint, acrid smell hung in the air. "Hello?" the boyfriend called out. His voice echoed eerily, swallowed by the silence. A door creaked open, and an old man emerged. His face was lined with age, and his eyes glinted with something unplaceable. Was it fear or malice? "You shouldn't be here," the man rasped. His words were barely audible, but heavy with warning. "We're just looking for help," the girlfriend exclaimed. "Our car broke down." The man didn't respond. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard. Then he motioned for them to leave. "Go back the way you came now." But curiosity had taken hold. The couple moved deeper into the village despite the old man's pleas. They saw more villagers, men and women with vacant stares, children peeking from behind doorways with wide, unblinking eyes. Whispers seemed to float on the air, unintelligible but filled with menace. In the village square, they found a decayed shrine surrounded by crude symbols carved into stones. The girlfriend reached out to touch one of the carvings, but a sudden bone-chilling scream tore through the air. The villagers were no longer watching from the shadows. They were closing in, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of rage. The couple turned and ran, their footsteps pounding against the uneven ground. Behind them, the villagers howled and screamed, their voices inhuman. When finally reached their car, the boyfriend frantically tried the ignition one last time, and miraculously the engine roared to life, and they sped away without looking back. As they reached the main road, the oppressive air lifted, and their phones buzzed back to life with missed messages and notifications. They never spoke of what they saw in that cursed village, but the memories haunted both of them. Years later, when recounting the story to friends, they tried to find evidence of the village's existence. Maps showed nothing beyond the sign they'd passed, and no one they spoke to had ever heard of such a place. Yet late at night, the girlfriend swore she could still hear faint whispers calling her back to Inunaki Village. Now that was the legend of the Inunaki Village. Now, according to the legend, the Inunaki Village is cut off from the outside world and hidden within a forested mountain region. And there is an old sign that is marked with a decrepit and ominous sign that reads, "The Japanese Constitution does not apply here." Now, apparently, there's dark secrets of the Inunaki Village. It is said that the villagers live by their own barbaric laws, rejecting modern society entirely. It's believed that horrifying acts of incest, murder, and cannibalism are commonplace within the village. And stories describe the villagers as hostile and dangerous, attacking and even killing anyone who ventures into their territory. Now, research says that there have been many encounters with Inunaki over the years. Some who claim to have found the village tell of ghostly encounters, strange sounds, and an oppressive atmosphere. And people have reported mysterious deaths and disappearances linked to the area. And vehicles attempting to reach the area are said to mysteriously malfunction or be abandoned. Now, this is an urban legend, so the origins of the curse and the legend is unclear, but some versions of the legend suggest that there was a mass killing or some kind of horrific crime in the village's past, which led to its spiritual downfall. But in reality, there is an actual place called Inunaki Pass in Fukuoka Prefecture, which has a reputation for being haunted. And apparently, a horrific murder did occur there in 1988, which further fueled the legend, and this legend is a relatively new one. There are also ruins of an old Inunaki village nearby, but this is apparently unrelated to the mythical village described in the legend. Now, in pop culture, this legend has inspired movies, books, and games, especially, most recently, the Japanese horror film called Howling Village. That's the English name, Howling Village, or the Inunaki Mura, which, was a movie that came out in 2021. I haven't watched it yet, but I have watched the trailer on YouTube, and it's a pretty frightening thing. So after you've listened to this episode of the podcast, go to YouTube, do a type for Howling Village or Inunaki Mura, and you can find the trailers. I think I'll try to watch some of the movie if I can. Find it. It is a Japanese language movie, but of course subtitles will help. It will be fun to watch. And of course, lots of urban explorers and thrill seekers. I guess they would be maybe what is the term? I'm having a complete trouble thinking of the term. What are they called? Road trippers? The people who do road tripping to find these kind of spooky places. Road trippers. That's not the term I'm looking for. I'm sure when I finish recording, someone can leave a comment to me somewhere about that. But urban explorers and thrill seekers have tried to locate the cursed village. But most reports end in either failure or terrifying, inexplicable circumstances. So, of course, there's lots of themes and interpretations when it comes to urban legends. Urban legends are usually stories where there is really no hard research or factual kind of knowledge. It's always, I once knew a guy who said that he knew someone whose brother did this or heard this. Now, the Inunaki Village legend reflects themes of fear of the unknown, societal isolation, and the consequences of rejecting norms. Its creepy atmosphere combined with a hint of plausibility makes it one of Japan's most popular urban legends. I personally first heard of the Inunaki Village urban legend back in 2020 while I was listening to an episode of the Scared to Death podcast, which is a fantastic, spooky, scary podcast hosted by Dan and Lindsay. It's fantastic. If you like the spooky podcast, go and check out the Scared to Death podcast. Tell them the Supernatural Japan podcast sent you. Tell them Kevin sent you. And they definitely have, I think, the best frightening podcast out there. And I believe Dan Cummings, he read that story all about the Inunaki Village, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. So that is it for another episode of the Supernatural Japan podcast, episode number 18. I hope you enjoyed the tale of the Inunaki Village. A few people have requested that over the time I've been doing this podcast, and I'm happy to bring that to you. And hopefully I will be bringing more episodes of the Supernatural Japan podcast to you more frequently. So please leave a rating where you've listened to this podcast. Please share it out. We'll get more people listening to it. Again, my name's Kevin O'Shea. I'm a Canadian who loves all things Japanese. I love all things spooky. I love folklore. Folklore has been something I have been fascinated with since I was really a kid, but more so once I hit university growing up in Canada. And it's something that I really just enjoy. You know, I enjoyed Scottish folklore, Irish folklore, and once I, married a woman from Japan, moved to Japan, lived there, I became really enthralled with Japanese folklore. So now that this episode is done, again, please share it out with those you know. And of course, you can come and follow us over on Instagram at Supernatural Japan. Please give us a follow at Supernatural Japan on Instagram. And then you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mad from Maple. And you can follow me on, where else am I? Threads at Jland Kev, and on X. Yeah, I'm still hanging in there because I have a big Japanese community there I'm part of, and that is at Mad for Maple as well. All those links will be in the show notes. And if you go over to the Instagram over at Supernatural Japan, you will see some photos from this episode, some pictures of the Inunaki Village lore, and some other things as well. I'm playing around with AI to make new logos and artworks for the podcast, playing around with the Chat GPT, Google Gemini, and all those wonderful tools. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening to episode number 18 of the Supernatural Japan podcast. I really appreciate it, and I hope to be talking to you and telling you more tales very soon.